The house was supposed to be silent, a monument to a legend already carved into American myth. But as the doors to John Wayne's estate opened after his death, the stillness felt wrong, heavy, almost watchful. Dust settled on trophies, scripts, and furniture that once framed a carefully built image. Strength without fear, certainty without doubt. Yet tucked behind locked drawers and forgotten rooms were traces of a man far more fractured than the world had ever been allowed to see. This was not the John Wayne of wide horizons and unbreakable resolve. This was a private aftermath, objects, letters, and absences that hinted at longing, regret, and battles never filmed. Each discovery felt like a crack in a statue, revealing something human beneath the stone. The question was no longer what he represented on screen, but what he was running from when the cameras stopped rolling. If a legacy is built on what we show the world, what happens when the truth survives us instead? And what does it mean when a symbol of strength leaves behind evidence of quiet fear? The estate does not greet visitors the way a monument should. There is no triumph in the air, no warmth left behind by celebration. Instead, silence settles heavily across the sprawling rooms, as if the house itself is aware that it has outlived its owner and now carries a responsibility it never asked for. Light slips through tall windows and lands on polished surfaces that once framed confidence and command. Everything looks preserved, yet nothing feels alive. Those assigned to catalog the estate move carefully, instinctively lowering their voices. This is not treated like an ordinary home. It is approached like a shrine, a place where American mythology was once rehearsed in private. Trophies stand where they have always stood. Framed photographs capture familiar expressions of certainty and dominance. Yet beneath the surface order, unease hums quietly, growing louder with each step deeper into the house. The rooms feel staged, almost defensive. Objects appear positioned to reinforce a story the world already knows. Strength, control, resolve. But when drawers are opened and shelves examined more closely, subtle disruptions emerge. Personal notes tucked away from sight. Margins filled with unfinished sentences. Thoughts that stop abruptly, as if the writer lost the courage to continue. These fragments do not belong to the icons celebrated on screen. They belong to someone far more cautious, far more uncertain. Emotion begins to thicken the air. Reverence gives way to discomfort. Some items feel intrusive to touch, as though they were never meant to be found. The house resists exposure, offering only glimpses rather than answers. What was once a fortress of image now behaves like a sealed confession, revealing just enough to unsettle without fully explaining itself. The sense of performance lingers, even in death. Psychologically, the estate transforms from property into evidence. Each room reflects the discipline required to maintain an unyielding persona over decades. The orderliness no longer reads as pride, but as control. The absence of softness feels intentional. There are spaces filled with achievement, yet curiously empty of intimacy. It becomes clear that this was not merely a home, but a stage where the role never truly ended. As the cataloging progresses, attention turns to a final room that remains unopened. Its door stands closed, untouched, carrying a weight disproportionate to its size. No one rushes to enter. Instinct suggests that whatever lies beyond may shift the meaning of everything already seen. The house seems to lean inward, holding its breath, guarding whatever truth was kept until the very end. Outside, the world continues to celebrate the legend without interruption. Inside, the myth begins to thin. The unopened door becomes a question that cannot be ignored. What part of John Wayne was hidden so carefully that even this carefully curated estate hesitated to reveal it? Long before the cameras ever captured his larger-than-life figure, before the applause and the silver screen triumphs, John Wayne's life was already a crucible. Childhood was neither soft nor forgiving. It was a series of relentless lessons in endurance. The family moved frequently, uprooted by financial uncertainty, each new house a temporary stage for survival. The rhythm of his early days was punctuated by whispered worries and the quiet tightening of fists, a world where silence was both shield and requirement. In such an atmosphere, vulnerability was a danger, and emotional exposure could feel like surrender. Strength became not a choice, but an obligation, a currency in a world that measured worth in resilience. From these early challenges, a psychological architecture began to form. A child who rarely received reassurance learned to rely on himself alone. Praise was scarce, criticism was immediate and sharp. Respectable masculinity, revered by parents and community alike, became a template he internalized, narrowing the spaces where tenderness and doubt might have safely grown. Even fleeting opportunities were framed by expectation: perform, endure, and never falter. Each moment of achievement was not celebrated for its own sake, but catalogued as evidence that weakness had been avoided, that survival had been earned. This relentless self-discipline carried subtle consequences. In private, Wayne began to learn the language of restraint. Emotions measured, gestures contained, thoughts folded inward. Joy was fleeting, suspicion constant. The world offered him chances, but each was a test, and every success a confirmation of self-reliance rather than an invitation to rest. His very identity hardened around endurance. And yet, within this protective shell, pockets of longing and curiosity quietly persisted, unopened, unacknowledged, foreshadowing threads through the narrative in subtle ways. The way he approaches opportunities, the careful curation of his own actions, and the early instinct to mask inner conflict all hint at patterns that will define his public life. Success is not a destination, but armor, shielding him from both external judgment and internal fragility. Each victory, each professional milestone, becomes a stone in the fortress he builds around himself, a structure both protective and isolating. The tension of this formative period is palpable, even decades later. The same resilience that will carry him to fame is also sealing away parts of him that may never reopen, spaces reserved for intimacy, uncertainty, and vulnerability. The foundations of legend are laid in silence and caution, and the cost, invisible in childhood, will echo through every later triumph and every hidden struggle. In this crucible, the boy is forged, but the man is already beginning to pay the price for the armor he will never be able to shed. The lights of Hollywood shone brighter with every step John Wayne took toward stardom, yet the brightness did not warm him. It burned. On screen, he became the embodiment of certainty, the square-jawed, unflinching hero who confronted danger with calm, unwavering resolve. Audiences clutched at his moral clarity like a lifeline in a world teetering on the edge of chaos. But behind the lens, behind the applause and the fanfare, the man himself began to shrink into shadows of isolation, the very traits that had once protected him transforming into invisible bars that confined his life. Fame magnifies both the strengths and the fractures of character. Every gesture, every decision, every nuance of expression was now magnified, inspected, and recorded. Wayne learned quickly that inconsistency could be dangerous, even deadly to a carefully cultivated persona. The need to remain steadfast became a relentless internal audit, a constant, exhausting surveillance of himself, even when no one was watching. Emotion, once natural and responsive, was now rationed, parceled out sparingly, never allowed to spill freely. Intimacy became a peril, friendship a carefully calculated risk. Each relationship was measured against the potential cost to image. Each moment of connection weighed against the demands of expectation. This internal pressure manifested in subtle, sometimes violent ways. Anger flared without warning in private spaces, often over trivial missteps that would seem meaningless to outsiders. Distance grew between Wayne and those closest to him, punctuated by absence and silence. Exhaustion became an invisible companion, one that no applause could soothe. Even successes, despite their grandeur, carried a hollow edge. They were markers of endurance, not celebration. Recognition and accolades piled up, yet there was little refuge, little room to breathe outside the roles he had perfected for the camera. Psychologically, the man became inseparable from the myth. Each film, each public appearance, each carefully staged moment reinforced the image at the cost of the man who lived behind it. He performed as the symbol demanded, leaving no space for doubt, for softness, for vulnerability. This constant performance reshaped his identity, binding him tighter to the persona the world revered while quietly eroding the spaces within himself that had once allowed for freedom and self-reflection. Even in rare private moments, the pressure was palpable. Walks through empty hallways were marked by the echo of silence, a reminder that fame had erected walls around him that no one could breach. Letters of admiration, interviews, and fan encounters were blessings and curses simultaneously. They affirmed the legend while deepening the awareness that the man beneath it was unseen, unknown, untouchable. The tension of this chapter grows with each passing year. Wayne's life is a balancing act on a knife's edge. One misstep could fracture the public's perception, yet every day spent in solitude chips away at his private resilience. The irony is cruel. Fame has given him everything, yet it has also denied him the one thing he might truly crave: refuge. As he stands at the pinnacle of his career, surrounded by adoration and material success, there is a quiet, haunting realization that the very life he had fought to master now cages him completely, leaving him to navigate a world where nothing feels fully his own. Time, once an ally in John Wayne's meticulously ordered life, now presses in with unrelenting force. The robust body that had once carried him through stunts, long shoots, and grueling schedules begins to falter. Physical decline is a relentless reminder that mortality cannot be evaded, and with it comes an emotional reckoning he can no longer postpone. The illusion of invincibility, carefully cultivated over decades, fractures in quiet, unavoidable ways. Simple tasks once taken for granted demand effort. The energy that had driven his persona, both on and off screen, now betrays him, exposing vulnerabilities long hidden beneath layers of discipline and performance. As the roles he once inhabited slow to a trickle, applause fades. The world continues, indifferent, while he confronts a silence he has rarely allowed. What remains is time. Time to think, to reflect, to feel the weight of choices made under the relentless glare of expectation. And time, in its cruel impartiality, offers no shortcuts. The psychological pressure that had always been contained by work and fame now presses inward, insistent and unyielding. Decisions once justified as necessary, moments of avoidance or suppression, weigh heavily in memory. Relationships left fractured or distant, friends, colleagues, family, return in recollection with sharp edges, cutting deeper than any public criticism ever could. Wayne experiences the subtle erosion of control, a phenomenon that frightens him more than illness itself. Strength, once his defining trait and the bedrock of his myth, no longer obeys him. The power that allowed him to master every environment and command every set is diminished. His mind, trained to direct and contain, now wanders in uncomfortable directions. Fear, guilt, and the whisper of unspoken apologies echoing through rooms he once filled with laughter and authority. The very identity that had made him untouchable begins to blur at the edges. The estate, once a fortress of accomplishment and public admiration, now transforms in meaning. Each room, each preserved artifact, feels heavy with memory. The spaces that celebrated triumph now serve as silent witnesses to solitude. There is no audience for this phase of life, no applause to validate the struggle. Even familiar objects, trophies, scripts, framed photographs, bear new weight, symbols not of victory, but of passage, of the cost exacted by a life lived in performance. Darkness settles slowly, not with spectacle, but with quiet inevitability. Regret, unspoken apology, and acknowledgement of what was lost permeate every hallway. The mind drifts to the fundamental question he has long avoided. When the performance ends, who remains to witness the truth? Not the fans, not the critics, not the world that has long celebrated the image, but those who truly know him, or perhaps no one at all. And in that silence, the estate itself seems to lean inward, almost protective, almost confessional. Every shuttered door, every untouched desk, becomes a repository for private reckonings. The man who spent his life shaping myth now faces the rawness of mortality, stripped of his carefully constructed armor. The weight of the fall is not only physical, it is profoundly psychological, a reckoning that illuminates the cost of enduring legend. The estate, once a living monument to legend, now carries a quieter, more intimate testimony. With John Wayne gone, the objects within his home cease to be trophies or symbols of triumph. They transform into markers of inner life. traces of a man navigating the tension between image and reality. Each room offers a glimpse of private effort, a subtle attempt to reconcile who he was with who the world believed him to be. Papers, photographs, and personal effects, often tucked away or incomplete, speak of thoughtfulness, tenderness, and a yearning for understanding. Even in absence, the estate insists on revealing truths that were long denied voice. The discoveries are revealing precisely because they unsettle the myth. Letters left unfinished suggest reflection and remorse. Items that appear inconsequential, an unpolished prop, a half-read book, a note scribbled in margins, carry the weight of unseen emotion. There is sorrow etched into what was never completed, gestures of intimacy hidden beneath a lifetime of public performance. These fragments do not undermine the legend. They humanize it, presenting a figure capable of fear, doubt, and longing, just as any ordinary life would. Wayne's legacy is reframed not as the absence of weakness, but as the endurance of it. Strength, it becomes clear, is not the same as invulnerability. The audience is invited to witness courage in its truest form. The ability to persist despite internal fractures, to carry the weight of expectation while concealing doubt. His influence remains, monumental and undeniable, yet now it resonates with layers of complexity previously obscured by narrative and myth. It is in the quiet spaces, the corners overlooked, where the real lessons of his life emerge. The estate's silence is profound. It holds answers that arrive too late to be articulated, secrets that might have altered relationships, understanding, or perception had they been shared. As rooms are revisited, the tension between public persona and private self becomes palpable. Each object, each artifact, is a silent witness to a dual existence, the celebrated icon and the man who bore the pressures of legend alone. In this reflection, viewers are left to ponder their own perceptions of heroism, strength, and vulnerability. The story closes not with finality, but with a meditative pause. There is no dramatic revelation, no ultimate unmasking. Only the quiet acknowledgement of a life lived in performance and the delicate traces of emotion left behind when the performance ends. The estate, restored to stillness, becomes a mirror not just of Wayne's private struggles, but of the fragile truths every human carries. In the echoing halls, in the dust-fine air, there remains the unsettling thought that even the strongest icons may spend their lives hiding from themselves, and that courage may often be measured in the silent endurance of that very concealment.